Hey, welcome to the Deeply Geeky podcast, where we believe that pop culture deserves the honor and respect of deep critical analysis. Deeply Geeky is made possible by the support of our Patreon backers, which is to say, if you like this content, please pay for it on patreon.com/deeplygeeky. All right, so welcome everybody to the first episode of the Deeply Geeky podcast. Deeply Geeky is a new project that I just launched. It is primarily a YouTube series where we produce video essays about geeky topics and go super into depth. Our first episode was about queer subtext and Harry Potter, and now we're following that up with an even more in-depth talk about that in a podcast. So I am your host, Dave Pickett, and my guest today is Andrew Sims of MuggleCast.
Hey.
Welcome, Andrew.
Hello, good to be here on your inaugural episode.
Andrew, is there anything you want to tell us about MuggleCast before we dive in?
MuggleCast has been around since 2005. I've been podcasting for a while. We talk about the latest Harry Potter news. We'll talk about anything J.K. Rowling is stirring up in the fandom, usually via Twitter these days. There's so many different elements of the Harry Potter fandom now between the movies, the theme park, J.K. Rowling's Twitter, all these spin-off books. There's a lot to talk about. So, yeah, we're having fun doing a weekly podcast and continuing to dive back into the books that we know and love.
Right. Well, I mean, it's now officially the Wizarding World, is it not, with the recent rebrand?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It's J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World.
The umbrella that covers the books, the movies, the plays, the theme park, the Lego sets, etc.
Yeah.
Did you see the Lego sets that they just announced last week?
I did. I'm not as big of a Lego fan as you, but I can definitely appreciate some cute-looking sets. So
yeah,
maybe I'll have to buy one.
I really like they gave the characters the short legs. All the kids, it makes them look extra adorable. So.
Yeah, they're very colorful sets, I thought.
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump into it. Queer subtext in Harry Potter. So you've watched the video essay I did, and if you're listening to this podcast, you can go watch that on the Deeply Geeky YouTube channel. But the major points I kind of talk about that is, of course, we have Albus Dumbledore, the one and only gay character in the Wizarding World, which contains, 700 some named characters, and he's the only one who's been confirmed to be gay, but that never happened within the text of the books. It was just in J.K. Rowling's interviews and stuff, so there's all the problems around that, and the fact that there's an opportunity to show Dumbledore is gay in Fantastic Beasts 2, but David Yates said it's not going to be explicit, and we don't know what that means, yada, yada, yada. We could talk about Dumbledore for an hour. And then I also kind of went through how kind of Harry's entry into the Wizarding World is kind of a big metaphor for growing up queer. Then looking at Lupin, Sirius, and Tonks and how they might be coded as queer in relationships. I'm totally really hardcore believing now that Lupin is bisexual and nobody can convince me otherwise after doing this. And then I even looked at Fantastic Beasts 1, Credence and the Obscurus as a metaphor for LGBTQ youth suicide, and Cursed Child, Albus and Scorpius, aka they finally were giving us a gay couple until they didn't.
That's the freshest scar.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about, you're gay. What has been your experience as a Harry Potter fan and, a queer person?
Well, first of all, I owe the Harry Potter fandom a lot in terms of coming into my own. When I was growing up in suburban southern New Jersey, I didn't really have anybody to confide in. I wasn't really sure about my own sexuality. And I made friends through MuggleCast and MuggleNet. The people who I worked with on the podcast and website became great friends of mine. And the Harry Potter fandom, God bless it, has always been very accepting as long as I can remember, it's been a very accepting bunch because we're all a little strange in the fandom. You got to be a little weird to like obsess over Harry Potter websites and do Harry Potter podcasts. So we kind of all bonded over our differentness, and so Harry Potter gave me friends who I could confide in, and when I did come out, it was a pretty slow process. It was just like one by one. I was coming out to different people, and these were only people I knew thanks to the Harry Potter fandom, I would mainly talk to through the internet. So for me, the Harry Potter fandom, I owe a lot because of that. But also, there is this issue about J.K. Rowling not exactly being very forward with the sexuality of her characters, namely Dumbledore. It's been a long-standing issue, and it's gotten worse, especially with Fantastic Beasts and David Yates's comments. So while I know J.K. Rowling strongly supports the LGBTQ community, and while I have the fandom to thank for who I am today, I'm also very concerned about where it's going right now. It's high time that things got explicitly gay in the Harry Potter fandom in the series.
100%. Well, I was thinking about this today. The timing of Harry Potter and fandom is very interesting because it was perfectly timed with the rise of the internet in a way that no other fandom really was. Yes, there were people writing fanfics about Kirk and Spock way back in the day, in the 70s or whatever, but they weren't able to get the attention that Harry Potter fanfiction was. And the fact that Harry Potter was first and foremost a written text, I think it inspired fan fiction in a way that other things didn't, and that it grew at the time of the internet. And as all of these other things are growing in the social consciousness, and it tapped into things,
right.
Harry Potter fandom is just it redefined. I mean, you could probably talk about that, but just how it's come to define what fandom is these days is really interesting. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, MuggleNet got started. I didn't start it, but Emerson Sparks, who founded the site, started it in fall 1999. And, of course, that was very early days of the internet. And I think what people loved about MuggleNet so much was that, they would get on their AOL dial-up, and they would somehow come across MuggleNet, I guess through searching. And they just found this amazing additional resource that they would never have had otherwise if it weren't for this newfound internet.
Yeah.
And so it was just very exciting to be able to find fellow Harry Potter fans because, as you say, Harry Potter was coming up around this time. So you didn't really know who liked Harry Potter and who didn't in the real world. And then you suddenly found tons of people online who were very interested. So yeah, I think it is so true that Harry Potter and the internet were growing at the same time, and our social values have been evolving at the same time as well. Harry Potter and just America's social values and accepting gay people, that has made huge strides in the past 10, 20 years. But in a way, Harry Potter has kind of fallen behind there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I in my research for the video, I found some articles talking about a study that showed that kids who had read Harry Potter were more likely to be accepting of LGBTQ people, which makes a lot of sense since it's all about kind of love and acceptance and, people who are outsiders and that. But yet then at the same time, there's this just huge lack of representation. So yeah, it's such a weird, interesting phenomenon. And, it's not really a phenomenon. It's just choices by J.K. Rowling and the powers that be in her, Warner Brothers conglomerate of whoever's making the decisions.
Right. And that is a big question. You do have to wonder at this point, because J.K. Rowling is so accepting and she's taught these great lessons in her book. You don't want to think that Warner Brothers is controlling her there. Don't make Dumbledore gay in the movies. The world isn't ready for that yet. You have to think that she's so powerful that she can do whatever she wants. So I'm hoping that is not the case. But it's a possibility because it's hard to explain it otherwise.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, okay, so there are, a total of 5 Fantastic Beasts movies plans, which seemed excessive when I thought they were all going to be about Beasts, but now that it's clear that it's really going to be about Grindelwald and his rise to power and all that, okay, 5 movies, sure. So I get that there are still 3 more movies in which they can explore Dumbledore and Grindelwald's relationship, whatever that was or is, because, we've only gotten, kind of cursory notes about it when it's been discussed. So, obviously there's still more opportunities, and we don't even know what's going to be in Fantastic Beasts 2. What David Yates thinks of as explicit might not be what we were thinking, right? Like,
yeah.
All I was really hoping for in this movie was, in some way Dumbledore referencing the fact that, he was in love with Grindelwald, right? Like when he was younger, right? That is a huge explanation for what his motivations are in pursuing Grindelwald, and, why he might not want to move directly and is using newts or, whatever is going to be happen based on what we've seen in the trailer. And that to me would be explicit because it would be the first time Dumbledore said anything like that, officially.
Right. And it just makes perfect sense because how is Dumbledore explaining the situation to Newt without including that bit of information about his interests? And we've also heard they're casting younger Grindelwald and younger Dumbledore, and the assumption was there's going to be some flashbacks, and those types of flashback scenes could help explain the story.
Right.
But I've been joking that in the Harry Potter series, Dumbledore does have a habit of withholding information from Harry, so it wouldn't be out of line in terms of his characters to hold that back for a while. Like suddenly, he's going to be like, Newt, sit down. I have to tell you something.
Right. Yeah, so, no, I mean, Dumbledore's whole character is withholding key information from people. He
loves to do that.
And, I mean, obviously a lot of how J.K. Rowling has written him as kind of this, he had a young love that scarred him and then, never loved again. It makes sense that he would not necessarily be forthcoming with his deep personal tragedy. But we'll see, I guess, with Dumbledore. But, it's also, there's been so many other opportunities to mention Dumbledore's gayness canonically at this point, right? How much stuff has she written for Pottermore, that's official, one-off stories, and how, it could have featured in The Cursed Child considering Albus is named after him, right?
Right. That's a very good point, actually. I hadn't thought about it being worked into The Cursed Child. That would have been a great way to make up for the fact that, for anyone who doesn't know, J.K. Rowling said in an interview in 2007, that was where she said, I always thought Dumbledore to be gay. Right. And that shook the world at the time. I was actually at that event, and I just remember running to the nearest Apple store, hopping on one of those computers and writing a post on MuggleNet, breaking news.
Yeah, no, my friend was also at the event, and she said that the room erupted into applause and celebration at that comment more than anything else.
Yeah, and you know what? A couple months ago, I was reading the transcript of that moment back, and after everybody applauded, she was like, "Oh, if I knew you all were going to react that way, I would have told you a lot sooner."
Oh
which is funny now because she noted in that moment the big response. So why didn't she do more after that?
Yeah. So are you familiar with the concept of virtue signaling?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that I learned about in the process of doing this research. The idea of you want to get credit for being progressive or sharing the virtues of some group. In this case, it would be, progressive people who like LGBTQ rights and acceptance. But you don't necessarily put yourself at risk in any way, shape, or form. So it's like signing the petition but not ever going to the protest. Or in this case, saying that Dumbledore is gay but never actually jeopardizing the international sales of your books or movies by putting that in there, which would cause it to be banned or censored in other countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but I'd like to think that she's above that now, and yet it's still so confusing as to why there hasn't been more.
Right. I mean, and she hasn't had a great track record in terms of like taking credit for, let's say, Hermione being recast by with a black actor for The Cursed Child, and saying like, oh, well, I didn't not say that she wasn't black, right? She doesn't ever say like, well, it was my idea, but she kind of like takes credit for being okay with it, even though it's not like she did anything to make that happen. And
right.
Ditto kind of saying, well, of course there were Jewish students at Hogwarts. I'm sure you saw that whole tweet debacle.
Yeah.
So, and like, I get it. She wrote it in the 90s, right? And like, she wrote it at a time where not all of these things were as top of mind as they are now, 20 years later. But, I feel like it would be better if she would just acknowledge, like, I didn't put this stuff in. I should. Let me write something to just, like, show this, or at least give you the names of some people. I don't know. It's like she has so many characters that she could just retroactively do something with.
Yeah. Give them what they deserve. And I mean, right now she's kind of on thin ice with Fantastic Beasts because of the whole Johnny Depp situation.
Yeah.
So she has an opportunity to, between that and then the David Yates' very bad comments about him not being explicitly gay. It's just like there's a couple of things that I see a lot of fellow Harry Potter fans on social media saying I'm just out of patience already with this franchise because it's not doing anything for me.
Yeah. And it's so, right? It's like, I was just thinking about this. This franchise has a theme park, multiple theme parks, right? Like at this multiple locations. Like this is a massive entertainment franchise, and it's it feels like at least, okay, so Marvel has not been great about putting gay characters in their movies, right? We just got some last week with Deadpool 2, but at least their comics, right, have some of these characters. So there is somewhere within, the Marvel canon, as it were, some of these other entertainment franchises that maybe haven't gotten there with their Hollywood movies, at least have representation in other parts of their work. But really, no part of Harry Potter has any of this. And it's kind of up there with all these other franchises in terms of like its impact globally.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I would blame Disney there for characters not having gay relationships in their films, because you remember the Beauty and the Beast drama when there's like that blink and you miss it moment, and they're like, oh yeah, there's gay characters, yeah. And and then with Star Wars there was Finpo, and that one we wrote. So one of our writers wrote an amazing article on Hypable about how they might be setting that up, and that article went absolutely viral because you could really feel it and see it on screen, and it doesn't look like that's happening in the series now.
I'm still hoping that at least Poe will be queer, right? Because they've written that he has like this necklace that's for his quote future partner, right? And right, he could still be into Finn and that be unreciprocated, right? I don't necessarily need Finn and Poe to wind up together, even though they obviously belong together. As long as they at least like acknowledge that like Poe is, queer, pansexual, landosexual, whatever they want to say, just.
I think what it ultimately comes down to is these international box offices, because they're afraid of it being barred in some countries.
Right. And, if that's what it is, it would be great if they would just own that, right? And just say like, this is what it is. Like, we put it in Deadpool 2 because that gets most of its box office domestically. It's R-rated, so we just have, like, it wasn't going to bring in money in China anyway, so we don't care that it would be banned there. Or they could release the gay version here and censor it internationally. Like they do different international releases of some movies anyway. Someone was telling me about how like Ultron or Avengers 2 Age of Ultron has a whole subplot with like this Asian scientist that's cut from the American version but is in the international version.
Oh, wow.
Similar to how like when Godzilla came to America, they threw in an American character and have all these scenes that are just jutted in kind of randomly just so we have someone to connect to. Like, I'm totally fine with them giving us a queer character and cutting the explicit, gay scenes out for an international release. Like, at least then they're being frank about why they're doing what they're doing and not trying to kind of like appease us without actually giving us anything.
Yeah. And similarly, I think with Beauty and the Beast, a country cut out the LeFou very quick moment of dancing. It's like,
oh my god, I had not seen Beauty and the Beast in theaters because I just like I had zero interest. But I recently rented the movie just to look for that moment. I was like, that was literally 1 second where he danced with a man in a group dancing scenario. It's not even clear that they're choosing to dance together. They just happen to dance together for a second, and they raise an eyebrow, kind of.
Right. It could have been spun as like, oh, they just accidentally started dancing in the craziness of the moment. Ha ha ha.
Or, this is a dance where people dance with same-sex partners just because it's like, it doesn't matter who you dance with for 5 seconds. There's that happens probably in square dancing too, that two men randomly dance together for a second. Yeah. Maybe not. I don't really do that much square dancing. So
same.
But, the fact that they made this huge thing about it in the press tour before the movie came out, that like, our first officially gay character and this exclusive moment. And it wasn't even a moment.
Right. There was like an exclusive in like People magazine or something, like Disney introduces gay LeFou or something like that.
Yeah. Like Finding Dory. I guess there was a big hubbub about like the fact that, there's two women who touch each other after seeing a baby in a stroller. So, they're not even like officially lesbians.
Right. They could just be two women next to each other.
Right. For a variety of reasons. Yeah. But that I think, again, like there was talk about like boycotting the movie because of that 1 second scene. So it's very depressing to like see all this and like have all this ado made about nothing. So
yeah, these studios and creators like J.K. Rowling just need to put their foot down and say, I don't give a beep. Can we curse on this podcast? I don't care.
Curse away.
I don't give a fuck what people think. I'm gonna do what I think is right.
Yeah, no, I mean that would be really refreshing. And I mean, obviously there are plenty of people out there creating queer content. But, a lot of that does not get wide release. Love, Simon and Call Me By Your Name are obviously two queer-centric films that got wide releases. Of course, they're both focused on, like, white, cisgender gay people. So, still we're not really getting any people of color or, many of the other intersectional aspects of this. But yeah, especially like geek cinema and geek media have really failed. And yeah, as like somebody who identifies equally as queer and geek, it's really hard that there's like nothing in that little bit of a Venn diagram there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's when you got to go to the fan fiction, I guess.
So speaking of which, how much have you delved into fan fiction as, basically a professional fan is how I think of you.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't. I'm sorry for the disappointing answer, but I just never got into fan fiction. It wasn't my thing. However, I will say that I was so shook after Albus and Scorpius happened that I wrote my own fan fiction, which I had never done before, and I posted it on Hypable. It's extremely graphic. Like, I am not kidding. It's very, very graphic, but I had to do it.
Right.
I had to get it out there because like a lot of people who write fan fiction, they see things to be a certain way when they read what is canon, and then they just take it under their wing.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's it for me. I have a hard enough time keeping up with official canon in the various fandoms.
No, I mean, yeah, I can imagine. You wouldn't want to get too many other things caught in your head that you might confuse for having actually happened.
That's a very good point too, actually, doing it on the podcast. But yeah, how about you? Do you read fan fiction?
Not a lot. So I have a friend, she reads a lot of fan fiction. She got into it mostly with Harry Potter, I think, but she now reads Finpo and all sorts of other stuff. But she will give me recommendations. So I've read some great like Torchwood, Doctor Who fan fiction, and like Torchwood actually had gay characters, so that was great. But like I read a whole basically book length fan fiction that was like just a different book 7 for Harry Potter, which focuses on a teenage version of Sirius coming back to life through the Marauders map, and that he's gay and he falls in love with Harry, and it's kind of weird, but it's also really good. It's called Cartographer's Craft. And like, I read like a Indiana Jones / Voldemort fan fiction once. There's like, what's great about that is like any pairing you could ever imagine, like somebody has written, and hopefully somebody else has written it well. But some things it's just I got it. I'm not super into Supernatural, but I've watched enough of it to realize that like Dean and Castiel are meant for each other. So I had to look up some of that because I know it'll never happen in the show.
Right.
So,
yeah.
What was how did you like kind of take in Albus and Scorpius when that happened? Because did you see the play? Did you read the script first?
Yeah. So, me and a bunch of other Hypable writers, when tickets originally went on sale for London, we jumped on the very first show because we wanted to write about it, cover it correctly. And so we saw the very first public performance, and I was convinced by the end of part 1 that these two were going to end up with each other, because there's this staircase scene. Mm-hmm. It's only about a page, maybe just half a page in the script, but if you see the show, it's at least a minute long, and they're dancing essentially across from one another, up and down stairs, looking at each other longingly. And there are various moments in the play where they just confess how much they love each other in a platonic way. Things I can't remember who says it to who, but one of them says to the other, like, I can't imagine my life without you in it. I would be in a hole with you for 40 years if it had to be that way. Stuff like that, just making these very striking remarks, which are very adorable, but it's also like you are setting them up to be gay. And then, as I think you put in your video, the situation gets no homoed at the end when Scorpius asks Rose Granger Weasley out for a date.
Right.
And have you seen the show?
I haven't seen it. I'm hoping to see it while it's in New York,
okay.
Because that's easier to get to than London for me,
right?
From Chicago. But I've read the script, and I've read people talking about the show and how the staircase moment. Well, it doesn't come across. It comes across pretty strongly in the text too, but like seeing it, like the music, the visuals, like it's all about how desolated they are to be apart. And multiple characters throughout are commenting on, how good they are for each other, how they belong together. I think they're even compared to like Snape and Lily by somebody. I couldn't find the exact point where somebody does that, but or Snape talks about like he understands, doing this for somebody because of what he does for Lily, and
Right. Yeah, there's something like that.
so there's it feels, I mean, it's the most important relationship in the whole show, and it just feels like it's being set up for that. And I'm sure Rose Granger is amazing, but she's barely in the show, right? She just shows up, drops some exposition.
Yeah.
There's no chemistry between her and Scorpius, and
Right.
I
mean, she's really only at the very beginning and the very end of the show. She's not involved in the main events of the play, of the time turning of any of that.
Right. And so it's and I mean, I get that it was written by like a straight dude, right? Like, because it wasn't written by J.K., it was written by Jack Thorne?
Jack Thorne, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe he just like is totally oblivious to what he did, but I don't know. It just seems like a huge missed opportunity, and like it's just one of those things. Like, how did they not see this? Like, how did they write this like this? And
especially when it's for theater, where attendees usually are more open to diversity. So like,
they don't have the international box office excuse there, because like it was literally, it's been in London and New York, like gay capitals of the world.
Right. It was all teed up. They surely saw it. So some of them must have. And now in interviews, like sometimes you'll hear them ask the cast about that, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I could see how some people would see it that way, but we actors, we play it our own way," and blah blah blah. It's like, come on. But yeah, that staircase scene, it's rough to watch in hindsight.
So what about the broader Harry Potter world? Are there any characters that, as a fan, as you've read them, you've kind of seen as feeling queer in one way or another, or, ways you've related to different characters?
Not really, because when I was growing up reading the books, I first started reading them when I was in 4th grade. And so I grew up not knowing my own sexuality probably till I was late teens, early 20s. And by then, the final Harry Potter book was coming out, so I never really established any of these characters as they could be gay.
Right.
So honestly, no, I didn't have that experience. Even reading back now, I guess they're just all so a certain way in my head. I don't really see it.
Yeah.
However, talking about the present day series Fantastic Beasts, Credence is definitely somebody who is still figuring out who he is.
Right.
And you mentioned in the video that the Obscurus is good subtext for that. I think he could even potentially be a gay character. It's not just that he has to withhold his magic, but he might be withholding his sexuality as well.
Right.
Because I think you also spoke in the video about his mom being this woman who represses his magic, who tries to get it out of him.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, he suffers like worse abuse than Harry ever did, who already suffered a lot of abuse, specifically around, repressing his magic, repressing who he is. And, Grindelwald is like tempting Credence with like, I'll be able to train you in magic, and has all these caressing, creepy moments.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what Grindelwald's sexuality is. We know that he manipulates people. So this could just be him like being super manipulative, but they are these very charged kind of like creepy moments with Grindelwald. And the actor who plays him, Ezra Miller, is also bisexual. So, I feel like he brought a lot of that to the performance as well. So I'm interested to see where they go with his character in Fantastic Beasts 2 and beyond. Because I do agree that there is an opportunity there as well to maybe have a queer character who actually has a relationship that's healthy with somebody. I don't know.
Yeah.
As opposed to Dumbledore and
you know,
Grindelwald.
I'm just thinking. You said that Graves / Grindelwald was manipulating him. I wonder if Grindelwald was taking advantage of the fact that maybe he senses that he's gay, because you're right, there was some caressing going on, and I still remember the first time watching it and being like, oh, whoa, wait, are we getting gay already?
Yeah.
this is moving quicker than I thought it would.
Yeah.
But also, there's a popular theory that Dumbledore's sister Ariana was an Obscurus,
Right.
and we know Credence is. So maybe there's going to be a connection there. Dumbledore can relate to Credence not only because of his sexuality, but also because of the dangers of being an Obscurus, and
Right.
Dumbledore's losing Ariana, really destroyed him. And that's
Yeah.
one reason why he can't face Grindelwald. So there's a lot of overlap there, actually, between Dumbledore, Grindelwald, Credence, if Credence is gay.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's, now that you mention it, it's pretty obvious looking back on Ariana's story, how she couldn't control it. She had these outbursts and she was thought to not have magic or, something around that. That definitely make her seem like Obscurus material. And the fact that Credence is still around and has said will be an important character, I can definitely see like Dumbledore and Grindelwald relating to Credence based on their previous relationship with Ariana. And there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff to explore there. I agree.
Yeah.
So, we'll see.
Yep. I mean, that's the other frustrating thing about this is when David Yates said not explicitly in the next movie, we were like, oh, great. So now we have to wait till 2020 to see something. Because some people are like, oh, just wait. We've been waiting forever. It's time to finally do something.
Right. We've been waiting a decade and a year since Dumbledore was announced to be gay.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
can you please insert one character in one of these stories to appeal to the fandom that consists of a lot of LGBTQ people?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like also it's just a disservice to the character of Dumbledore to not have... And I mean, also, like, Jude Law's vest game is super strong just based on the trailer. Like, I mean, just like, I just really want him to be able to play with, like, the full range of this character's, like, complexity. Because, I mean, Dumbledore is just such a fascinating character, just like this deeply compassionate, I can say that word, but also super manipulative character, and it's like these incredible contrasts, and
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I used to play this game with friends where I'd ask them to rank wizards, Dumbledore, Merlin, and Gandalf. Like to me, like three very prototypical, like wizards. And, for me, Dumbledore was always the top because he was like the most interesting, compelling human of those wizards. Whereas, Gandalf literally gets resurrected and whatever, and Merlin's experiencing time backwards. You can't relate to those people. But Dumbledore is like this amazing, powerful person who's also deeply flawed, deeply compassionate, deeply human. So,
I like what you said about it being a disservice to his character, because also he wouldn't stay in the closet at this point, at this age. He'd be proud of who he is.
Yeah. Well, and also it'd be really interesting to know how the wizarding world feels about queer people. Like that's always what I'm interested in like, made up universes, is how some of the issues we deal with in the real world translate into that place. And, this is set in the 1920s, not a great time to be gay, but also kind of, because it was in like this weird period where like, I think that's like when all the like gay nightlife in Berlin was happening, because it was between the wars. So this could have also been a really super gay time in Europe. So are there like gay wizard bars in Paris? You know, right? Like,
yeah, it's a good question. These are the types of things we talk about on MuggleCast all the time. It's like how would wizards handle just over Mother's Day? We were talking about like how do you raise a kid in the wizarding world? How do you teach them about spells and how to not do spells and not touch the parents' wand, stuff like that. There's a ton of interesting questions there about how the wizarding world handles things we find ordinary in the Muggle world.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody Andrew, not you, Andrew, a different Andrew, who edited the Deeply Geeky video about the paintings in the Harry Potter verse that are basically sentient beings, right?
Yeah.
They can have conversations, they relay information, and just like, how do those get painted? Is there a special type of paint? Can anyone do it? Like, how is it related? Because it's low key kind of like a Horcrux, right? Like,
yeah, that's a very good question.
And wouldn't Voldemort also have had a ton of portraits somewhere just so like
right,
he could relay messages in case he got turned into weird spirit baby, whatever he was, in between the era. Like, there's just so much stuff that could be explored. I really love the universe that's been created, and I just wish they would kind of open it up more. I feel like it's at a weird point where it's really grown beyond what one person can truly manage, right? Like J.K. Rowling, there's too much content being created at this point for her to do all of it.
Right.
But she still is in this position of like, the creator.
And I think that's something that the franchise is going to be dealing with in bigger ways over the next decade. I think one of the striking things is you mentioned it's the umbrella is now just, I called it J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World. The logo doesn't even have her name on it anymore.
Right.
It just says
the
Wizarding
World. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is their gateway to start letting other creators in. And then we can have more of these opportunities, hopefully. I think a TV series is inevitable.
Oh, yeah. Like, if Amazon paid how many million or $1 billion for the Lord of the Rings, imagine how much a streaming service will pay for a Harry Potter TV series.
Exactly.
They got
Wizarding
compete. World. Yeah.
Like, Apple still needs, like, a big one. They're putting together their own TV originals right now. They still need a big brand like Stranger Things or Lord of the Rings or Disney's Netflix that they're putting together. Like, somebody needs to nab Harry Potter, so I find that inevitable, and maybe we'll get some gay characters in that.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you look at what's been happening with Star Wars since it left, since Disney bought Lucasfilm, essentially is what happened, right? But like, Lucas is no longer the person who has authority over Star Wars, right? There are now multiple people, like everybody's getting a trilogy now, right? Because there's like, how many trilogies have they announced are happening? Like, I can't even keep track of them.
The Game of Thrones showrunners are doing one. Jon Favreau's doing the one for the Disney Netflix. So and there's at least two.
Oh, yeah, and the guy who did Last Jedi, he has a trilogy.
Rian Johnson. Right,
yeah. So there's like all these Star Wars projects being announced. I want that many Harry Potter projects so that we can start to get other takes on this universe or explore other parts of it. And and that's my point. I do think it's going to be a slow transition that you kind of see it now with these video games they're starting to release. Like, they're not canon, they say. I do think the TV series will be canon, but between like stretching their wings with the video games and the Cursed Child and the Wizarding World dropping J.K. Rowling's name in the logo, I think all it would take is J.K. Rowling being like, hey, I had a hand in hiring this creator. I believe that they're going to do a great job with, let's say, a TV series. I think with J.K. Rowling's firm blessing, it could be very, very good. I say firm blessing because, like, Cursed Child, like, she's still yet to like actually talk about any of the plot. Yeah, it kind of exists like this ascended fanfic.
Right.
Where,
for what it's worth, she did say she considers it canon, but I still want to hear, like, did you have Bellatrix and Voldemort's relationship in your head? Like,
yeah, that's Yeah, some parts of it are fun to add to the canon, like Scorbus, and other parts like Dumbledore or not Dumbledore, Voldemort's daughter are like,
Yeah.
Personally, I imagine that totally happening versus magical artificial insemination. Like, I do not imagine any actual sex taking place there because Voldemort's super weird. That's how I dealt with it. Yeah,
and that's one reason it's so bizarre. It just like came out of nowhere. It's certainly good for theater. It certainly creates a shocking moment, but I don't know. It just doesn't really add up in canon.
Oh yeah, I guess I should have also said at the beginning of this, spoiler alert for everything Harry Potter ever. All right, well let's talk about we've talked about a lot of things, but I wanted to briefly touch on some recent, queer characters. So we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but Lando Calrissian has been officially announced to be off-screen pansexual as of like less than a week ago, and Solo, a Star Wars story, is about to come out, so I'm excited to see Donald Glover in that role. I already was, but like now, like this is actually makes it less exciting for me because it's like I would have just been fine to watch Lando and just enjoy him being Lando, but now there's like this, oh well, he should have been queer. And they didn't make him queer, right?
Right. You gotta watch. You're like watching out for it now. You're watching out for hints,
right? And it's baffling to me that so many studios keep doing this, like outing a character in the press tour, even though there's nothing actually in the content that confirms it, because it actually makes me angry. It doesn't make me happy or feel included or represented. So I don't know how you felt about Lando, but it was a big sigh from me.
Yeah, I'm a pretty casual Star Wars fan, not hardcore like you might be or others who were reacting to this news. But yeah, it is a sigh because it's the same thing that happened with J.K. Rowling. She's announcing it after the fact.
Right. Oh yeah, I came up with a term for it, which is extratextual homosexual.
Rolls off the tongue nicely.
Right. I like rhyming things. Did you see Deadpool 2?
I did.
Yeah. So that was great, right? We got Negasonic Teenage Warhead and her girlfriend Yukio.
Yeah.
Just like casually being a couple. They didn't really do much more than hold hands a little bit, but it was, I think, our first really like on-screen gay superhero in a Hollywood movie. So
yeah, and it seems like Deadpool is one of those, you earlier you mentioned it being R-rated, so they don't have to appeal to kids, or maybe don't worry about the international market because a lot of the money comes in domestically. That's just a franchise that doesn't give a fuck. They're like, we're gonna do what we want. And it's, if Deadpool was like officially part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like I know it's officially Marvel, but it's not like in the Avengers storyline.
Right.
This would be a whole different ballgame. But Deadpool exists outside of that Avengers MCU bubble, and it's really refreshing to see a superhero story that takes risks and pays off in an amazing way. I mean, the movie's hilarious. Her sexuality doesn't stand out. It's not like, oh my god, we have to stop everything. It's just a part of the plot. It doesn't disrupt anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's as much there as Domino being black or Fire Fist being plus sized, as they say at one point. Like, it's just like part of who they are, and they don't spend a lot of time on it, but it's there. And like visually, at least, surface level, we're getting more representation than basically all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in that respect. Maybe aside from like Black Panther, but it's such a good proof point of like how easy it is to like add representation and diversity, and just move on with whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and Black Panther was hopefully a learning lesson for Marvel, because I don't think anyone expected the box office to be that big.
Right, which is, they should have, but yeah.
I know. Yeah, and I mean, what it really showed was there was a demand for diverse blockbusters.
And I don't know how closely you followed this, but the one thing I do want to say about Black Panther, in addition to being awesome, is that is another example of where they kind of wimped out on having queer representation. So Okoye, the lead of the Dora Milaje, the police force, originally was supposed to have like a queer moment with one of the other fighters, but then they cut that and gave her a heterosexual relationship instead. So that's like that would have made that movie like the best movie of all time if they had just like gone the original direction with that.
Yeah.
And similarly, like Valkyrie in Thor Ragnarok had like a cut scene, I believe. I think they even filmed it, or maybe it was cut from the script, but where she just casually, like a woman walks out of Valkyrie's room, like indicating that they slept together, right? Just like a moment before something else happens. And it's like, I think Deadpool 2 is a proof point that like, no, you could have kept that in. It would have not distracted from the movie, and it would have added some depth to a character.
Right.
And, it's sad that like, these are like the little nuggets that those of us who like follow this beat of queer representation in Hollywood like have to like grasp onto. Like, they almost put this moment in this movie.
So exciting.
Yeah, because like Tessa Thompson has come out and said like, I played Valkyrie as bisexual. She's canonically bisexual in the comics. There's a moment where she's like reaching for one of the other Valkyrie warriors as she's dying, and she's like, I played that moment as if that woman was my lover, and so like the way she's looking at her and like reaching out, that was like all she could do. And it's like,
speaking of all these movies where we're getting screwed over, I will just briefly mention that Netflix is about to release an original movie on June 8th called Alex Strangelove.
Oh yeah.
And this is about a high school senior who has a girlfriend, but then he meets a gay guy in school, and he realizes that he actually might have feelings for him. So This is actually showing bisexuality, and it's a Netflix original movie. So if you want to support movies that are actually showing different forms of sexuality, check this out on June 8th. It looks cute.
That's great. No, I was going to ask, if you had any other recommendations for like positive LGBTQ representation, especially in like kind of geeky media. Mine, which I said in the thing, is Steven Universe. It's just like packed full of queer characters. It's a lot of subtext, but it's like so clear. It doesn't really. I mean, it's like they've had certain episodes like dubbed or banned in other countries because it's so gay, which is like, again, to me, a positive sign. Like they went for it and then dealt with the consequences elsewhere. So
right, and didn't care. They did it anyway because they thought it was the right thing to do.
Right.
I haven't read like LGBT fantasy or really into any LGBT themed TV series, but I have heard of the series called A Darker Shade of Magic.
Yeah, my husband read that and has been telling me I need to read it. So
okay.
I literally have it sitting on a shelf. I think also there's, what is the one about witches? It's like something of witches. I'll look it up later. But yeah,
okay.
I know there are like a lot of books out there that are doing this really well.
Yeah. And this is on my to-read list because apparently it's also very good with feminism, and it features people of color and non-toxic masculinity. So,
hey, all of those things are great. The other thing that I watched recently, which was really awesome, was Janelle Monáe's Dirty Computer. I don't know if you're familiar with
I
Janelle
heard
Monáe.
about that.
Yeah, so Janelle Monáe just released a new album, Dirty Computer, and she also came out as, I think, she came out as queer. She's bi or pan. I mean, these days we kind of use a whole bunch of terms to say one thing sometimes. She also released with the album a motion picture. So it's basically a bunch of the music videos for the singles put together with a framework. So it's kind of, like a Lemonade style thing, but it's a futuristic queer sci-fi thing. So her and her, male and female lovers are having their minds erased, but also, you see their memories of when they were just, hanging out, having sexy fun times on the beach also.
Yeah,
so it's
that's cool.
Fun, like bisexual sci-fi thing that just dropped pretty recently that I enjoyed watching. So,
well, slowly but surely we're getting more. It's taking a while, but it's kind of happening.
Yeah. So, well, we're coming up on the hour mark here, so I'm just going to wrap that up. Did you have any final thoughts you wanted to bring up before we wrap here?
No, I think it was a fun discussion. I have faith that if J.K. Rowling doesn't really give us what we want, the fandom is going to stick together and support each other's original works. If it's my really gross cursed child fan fiction, or maybe if it's something more child friendly or family friendly. No, I really just want to say again that I absolutely love the Harry Potter fandom. It's such a weird conflict because it's like it helped me come out. It let me meet other people who are gay. I don't know where I would be without the fandom, and yet there is that big hole. So as with a lot of these types of issues in our world today, it's a slow battle.
Yeah, no, I think I'm really glad you said that. That's something I like to emphasize a lot as like a geek who also is, an intellectual and a progressive. Like, I love the things I'm talking about. I wouldn't be talking about Harry Potter if it didn't mean a lot to me. But you can love a thing and then also have notice problematic aspects of it and be like, yeah, I love this, but I'd love it even more if this. And so I think, and that's a hard thing in, fan culture sometimes, where it's like, this is my identity, and anyone who criticizes in any way is not a true fan, is attacking me. I'm like, no, I'm not attacking you. You're awesome, but
right.
This thing is hurtful in this way, and it might not to you, but it does to other people, and you should be open to at least listening to them.
Exactly.
Anyway.
That debate has come up a lot in the Harry Potter fandom. Like, sometimes people will be like, how dare you say that? It's like, I'm criticizing because I love it. I'm criticizing because I want to see it get better.
Yeah. So, yes. Criticizing with love and care. Totally on board with that. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the Deeply Geeky podcast. As a reminder, people can find you on the internet at Sims, SIMS on Twitter, super easy, and of course on MuggleCast.
Yes. Yeah, we're having a lot of fun there, and maybe we'll have you on the show sometime.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. I'd be happy to talk about all the gay stuff in Harry Potter anytime.
Yeah, and the fan fiction you've read, because me and the others, I don't think we've read much.
Right. All right. Thanks, Andrew, and have a great night.
You too.
If you've listened all the way to the end of this podcast, you're probably really into this content. So please consider paying for it by going to patreon.com/deeplygeeky and becoming a backer. You'll get access to content early and other cool perks. It's a good idea.